everyone is being held up. I'm going to go very quickly. And you know what? When you are the last presentation, I think it's actually a great time slot because then you know everyone in the room is very interested. Okay, so Mundoro. We are definitely an exploration company. We are focused on really making a discovery in Eastern Europe, and we are really focused on basically two commodities, which is copper and gold. And the reason for that is because that is what the type of minerals that are primarily found in this district in terms of the porphyry systems. It's really, you get both. Some tend to be more gold focused, some tend to be more copper focused, but essentially that's what you're looking at when you're looking at Mundoro. So how do we do this? You know, as Joe discussed a little bit earlier, it's very difficult to find exploration capital for the long term for a lot of these types of projects. So our approach is to get partners. So there are plenty of good miners out in the industry that are looking for assets. They don't necessarily have what I would say dedicated or certainly as much focused exploration teams. So our job is to really make a discovery, bring in those miners, get the financing in terms of drilling out those deposits or those types of targets, and then basically handing over those assets to the miners. So in terms of what's an important aspect for Eastern Europe is that it's got very good infrastructure. Infrastructure is important because if you find a project, if you look at a lot of the capital expenditures of most of the world-class assets, you're spending about a quarter to a third of your capital expenditure just getting to site. And then the rest of your capital expenditure is obviously constructing the mine and the mills. So the fact that you've got already infrastructure, rail, smelters, labor force, electricity, all of that is extremely important in convincing those miners to come out and really develop these projects, which is important, I think, for investors. In terms of, obviously, I'm going to make a lot of forward-looking statements in order to explain the projects, but let's just start with what we're doing. Basically, we're drilling. That is what the majority of our program is this year. We're drilling with JOGMEC. JOGMEC is a Japanese state fund, and their mandate is to go out globally and find natural resources and basically secure those future concentrates. So specifically in Serbia, where they're a partner for us on 4 of our projects, we're going to be doing 5,000 meters of drilling this year on a really interesting target that essentially has the possibility of becoming a high sulfidation and perhaps a deeper porphyry. And then this year, what we've brought on board is also Freeport. And obviously, many of you are familiar with Freeport. They're also looking globally for projects, and they are the type of company that really gets involved earlier on in the cycle. So we're quite thrilled to be working with them. And in fact, we signed the agreement in July of this year, announced that, and we're actually going to be starting to drill in October this year. Then we've also got 2 more projects, which I'll talk about a little bit later in Serbia, which are quite interesting and I think have an opportunity to bring in 1 more partner in Serbia for the company. Now, Bulgaria is a bit of a sleeper, and in terms of my presentations, you probably haven't heard me talk a lot about what we're doing specifically there, but I'll walk you through Svoboda. It's a very interesting project. We won the tender last year in October, and that has some very interesting historical grade that I'll go through. But another little sleeper is Saget, which is a lead-zinc project that had previously been in production over 20 years ago. We've brought in a private mining company to do due diligence drilling. That information will be out by the end of the quarter, in the 4th quarter, and I think everyone will be quite interested to see those results. In terms of capital structure, we've got 69 million shares outstanding. We're hypersensitive to dilution. You don't see us doing a lot of financings, and it's also because we've got that partner model. We've got about 4.8 million in cash as of the end of the 2nd quarter. And really what you're going to see is our balance sheet doesn't go down very quickly simply because we are so focused on that partner model, bringing in those miners in order to earn into the projects by spending and really reducing that risk for our balance sheet and our shareholders. So where are we and what is the Tethyan Belt? I think this is a really important slide. The Tethyan Belt is quite large. And as Joe mentioned a little bit earlier, There are some jurisdictions that even investors do not want companies to go into, but Eastern Europe is quite interesting because it definitely has, I think, a long history of mining, which is really the foundation, I think, for a good jurisdiction, but it's also changed their mineral laws quite recently. And as a result, it's my personal belief that you see a lot of companies that talk about Chile and Peru. There's about 1,000 projects that are currently being invested in specifically northern Chile and southern Peru. But in the Tethyan Belt, and specifically in Serbia and Bulgaria, over those same line kilometers, there's maybe 1/10 of those number of deposits. I believe that there is a lot of really good potential for more discoveries, and that's what gets our industry excited, is discoveries. So I think it is actually quite good to look at them as a region, all the companies that are investing in this particular part of the world. So where are we specifically? Serbia, we're in the Timok complex, and that is, really the place where we started. As you move towards the southeast, the Panaguriste is the next really important volcanic complex to get into, and where there is existing mining operations. And then as you travel further down, you get into the Rhodepian region. I think what's important about Bulgaria and Serbia is that even though they're very small countries and they are really in need of more foreign investment, there's already a lot of foreign investors in these two particular countries. So I think that's demonstrates that they are improving jurisdictions where a lot of companies are seeing the benefit of investing there. This is what Timok looks like. It's basically a town of 35,000 people, and it's basically in the center of this volcanic complex. When you look at what's going on in Serbia, it's essentially these red licenses that we have and the purple license, which is our current joint venture with Freeport. That ground was available 5 years ago. So all of that area was completely unstaked. And when you have a mining operation that's been in production for 100 years, where there's not just one porphyry, but there's three porphyries, three large mines, you recognize that that's a really important geological feature, and you want to obviously get as close as possible to that main structure because these systems tend to happen in clusters. So we were extremely lucky to basically recognize that before the rest of the market did. And now we've got a substantial land package. The northern licenses we have in option with JOGMEC. They became involved with us in 2016, and so we're getting to the third year of our arrangement with them. So they will have spent $4 million US. They'll actually have spent more than $4 million by the time they're finished. So they're going to overspend on their first phase, which is obviously advantageous to us. And then they need to make a decision to go into phase 2. Which would require them to spend an additional $32 million in order to produce a feasibility study. Then with Freeport, we just signed them on this year, so we're starting another 3-year program, and they're going to be spending $5 million US over those 3 years in order to earn in 51%. That is all coming through from partners. It doesn't come through the balance sheet. It doesn't come through our share structure. That is something that investors benefit from just by owning the equity. So specifically with Serbia, this is what's exciting. And I'm not going to go into the technical details because we don't have time for that, but certainly Joe has taken a look, and you're coming out on site in November, which I think will be important for anyone who's interested in those technical details to really drive in on that. But essentially, this image right here really demonstrates what I'm talking about. There are 3 major mines right here, all within basically 10 kilometers. On top of that, you've got the Čukaru discovery, which is a world-class deposit, which now Zijing has basically bid $1.2 million in order to buy just the upper zone. So a tremendously prolific portion of the mineral belt, and our license area is basically wrapped all around that. And that, I think, is what the opportunity is, because not only do we own the license, but we have a partner that's actually spending in order to really test out these targets. This is a geophysical anomaly, and I think basically what I'm going to rush through to is with Freeport, we're starting that program in the 4th quarter of this year, and we'll have those results out probably by the 1st quarter of next year. And as you can see, these are the initial kind of locations for that drilling. And basically, the last thing to kind of end with is Bulgaria. So this is the Svoboda abandoned mine. This is an interesting area because essentially there's also porphyry mines that are in production here. There's a high sulfidation underground mine that's in production here. And now we've basically won the tender for 200 square kilometers and the southern port of that, a portion of that complex. Freeport is just to the south of us in a JV with another group. And what's interesting is that there's 15 kilometers of alteration. There's 70 mineral occurrences here. There's an old underground mine. And one of the intercepts that we've come across in digitizing all that old information is basically 7 meters of, I think I've got it here in this slide, 7 meters of 7.46% copper, which is a phenomenal intercept, which of course our primary focus is really to test that ourselves, demonstrate that that's real, and if it is, that has the potential obviously to look like another high sulfidation system. And last but not least is to remind you that we do have a lead zinc project here in the southern part of the country, which is currently being drilled and funded by a private mining company, and they have basically until the end of this year in order to make a decision in order to earn into this project. So 3 parallel programs funded by partners, a very good dilution scenario in terms of us because we're not going out in the market to raise more money, and there's, I think, a really interesting opportunity at Svoboda. There you go, that's the end of the presentation.